Um, my name is Bradley Flam. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability here at West Chester University, and I'm honored to welcome all of you to this, our evening community panel discussion looking at moving towards a plastic-free future. West Chester University has been very happy to have a close relationship with the West Chester Green Team over the past 8 years at this point. We have worked on film series and lecture series and events of all different kinds at the holidays. We are just grateful for the collaboration that we have with them. So I just wanted to welcome all of you here tonight to the university to thank the West Chester Green Team for their drive and passion on this issue and others in Chester County, and to thank all of you in the audience, students, faculty, staff, community members, for joining us here tonight. And with that, I'm going to end and pass it over to our moderator tonight.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for welcoming us so wholly. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Gombosi. I am the relatively new volunteer helper leader of our Plastics Free initiative within the West Chester Green Team. I'm going to be your moderator for tonight. We have an amazing panelist group here. I'm going to do just an introduction of who they are, their titles, and as we proceed through our panel, we'll have them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about what they focus on, their passion areas, and help us understand more about plastics and the role it plays in our lives. So again, I am relatively new, but we've been trying to kick off some new initiatives within the West Chester Green Team this year. We've had some success so far in this distributed, or this flyer that we handed out to local businesses. The idea was, how can we help businesses understand the value in moving from single plastics to a more sustainable alternative? We had volunteers from the Westtown School that came and met us in town, and we were able to hand out flyers to over 40 businesses together, trying to talk to them where able and kind of marking down was their interest. And so, as you know, with many community initiatives, it's important to repeat, and so I think we'll try something like that again in the spring. And at this point, I really want to hand it over to Rachel Joy Davis, who is specifically the PA, GIT, and sustainability leader. And she was the lead before myself of the Plastics Free Please initiative, and is kind enough to really do a deep dive into kind of the educational parts before we get into our panel tonight. So I'm extremely grateful. I'm going to learn some things as well. Again, how can we continue to bring these initiatives forward in the community, working together with volunteer groups, local universities, and many other groups across Pennsylvania. So, Rachel, I'll hand it over to you, and I will introduce, like I said I would, after our mini presentation here, and we'll get into the rest of our panelists. So thanks, everyone.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. So my name is Rachel Davis, and I helped co-found the Plastic Free group here in West Chester with the Green Team, alongside Margaret and Nathaniel and some of the audience members here. So my background is in geology, geochemistry, environmental studies, and so the GIT in my title is geologist in training, so that means I'm just halfway to a professional geologist degree. I spent 10.5 years as an environmental consultant working on environmental cleanup sites, so specifically contaminated soil, air, indoor air, water, things like that. So I was firsthand involved with what is really what it takes to clean up a contaminated site, and also the impact of all of the chemicals and things that we have in our environment. So with that background, I was very much interested in joining the Green Team for a few years in the end, I think it was 2017 to 2020. And through that group was very involved and brought in students, brought in many people from the community, spoke on panels, spoke at various fairs, and just tried to keep the enthusiasm and the momentum going with all the local initiatives. I will be presenting tonight. This presentation is going to be a very high level overview, so I'm not going to read every single slide. There's so much information ongoing with plastics. Every day there's more studies, there's more things to know. If you come away with any piece of information, you just stick it in your pocket and remember, that's great. I'm not asking you to remember every single thing here, but if you learn something new, that's gonna be a goal. So I know our presentation is all about the future of plastics, but I think it's a good idea to just set the base of what are plastics and what do they turn into, and why should we care? So I'm gonna just jump in here. So as you know, plastics are an oil-based compound, and they were initiated back in the early 1900s, and they are useful for everything from cosmetics to medical equipment to planes and transportation to containing our food and so many different things. And so over time, these very strong bonds of carbon and silicon and other elements, they break down over time through photo deterioration, which is through the sun. And when they start to break down, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. They don't really ever disappear. And so when they are breaking down, they also attach to other compounds. So plastics are very good at grabbing onto other chemicals. So if you ingest a piece of plastic, it will go through you, but it's when it sits in the soil and the ocean that it actually absorbs to other things like polybiphenyls and PFAS, which is the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances like in Teflon. So it's really that combination of the plastics breaking down and then joining and combining at a chemical level to the other compounds, which can really start to create some downgradient health impacts across our planet. And we are finding microplastics, nanoplastics in our local rivers here in the Delaware and the Schuylkill and across Pennsylvania farmlands. And it's ending up kind of everywhere. So as we can expect when the whole world uses plastics, and it's not like it's expelling out to space, they're gonna just stay here with us. But let's not lose hope. I'm just setting the stage. So it's pretty much, we have to act now. And acting now can start with just education. It doesn't mean starting your own plastics group. It doesn't mean joining a company to get rid of plastics out of the ocean. It just means starting to get educated, get the facts, start somewhere, and build on what you know, and then build on what brings you joy, or focus on something that you can do and go in that route. So our health impacts are rising. Chemicals associated with endocrine disruption, your nervous system, they're breaking the blood-brain barrier, and there's also some respiratory issues as they lodge into your lungs. Plastics are also made from fossil fuels, as I mentioned earlier, so over time, obviously, climate change is going to be impacted by just the extraction of oil from our underground reserves, and obviously with burning plastics, now you're re-releasing all those carbon compounds back into our breathing space. Economically, it's actually really an imperative as well. So if you're not caring about the environment from an economic standpoint, communities and municipalities and cities are spending astronomical amounts of cleaning out their waterways, or they're installing new systems in their potable water source, chemical elimination sites. So there's a lot happening. If something feels like it's pulling you, oh, the environment is really my concern, or my health is my concern, or you don't want your community spending so much money on these things, pick one of those things and follow that. You don't have to memorize or care about every aspect, but just know that it's plastic consumption, overconsumption is actually very much impacting all of us in many, many different ways. So health impacts, we know that we're all exposed. And so I mentioned it's in our blood, it's in our lungs, it's in our placental tissue. They're finding it in lots of different parts of the reproductive system. And it's causing some pretty chronic issues relating to irritation. So think of these little particles as breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, and they're actually not turning into the original compound. They're just staying very small. So they're going to end up places where there's that porous system within your body where they can get lodged. So there's different issues that can impact us just from the actual physical plastic. And then in number C, you'll see that bacteria and heavy metals will actually attach to their surface onto the compound of the plastic. What's really uncertain still, there's ongoing studies in not just lab animals but also in humans, is that we're not really sure at what level it can cause harm and also at what age we might start to see that harm. So as you can see up there, it's in the placental tissue. If a fetus is unknowingly ingesting and building its body with microplastics, we don't know yet the impacts of that. So if you're interested in health, if you're interested in a future society that is going to have less damage in its lungs and its reproductive system and nervous system and respiratory system, this is something that's ongoing. So if there's research that you feel interested in, you can continue to look that up. But we're still figuring it out. And this is what I just talked about. Typical safe or harmful thresholds. We're still trying to understand. And not all plastics or particles behave the same. So there's different polymer types, the way that the compounds are linked together, the carbon chains added to other elements. So there's so much to know. And as they break down, some of them actually bond to other things that we're still unsure of what they look like. So signs show there's reason for concern, but not yet panic. So obviously it's a worldwide issue. Everyone in the world is using plastics, but why is this a local Pennsylvania issue? So plastic waste is one of the top items that is a pervasive danger to our waterways, our local rivers, our streams, and when we do stream cleanups and we have community events to remove plastic or remove trash, most of it is plastic. So obviously it's a physical issue in our waterways. We also have a socioeconomic issue in that Chester and in the Ohio River Valley nearby us, air quality and water quality are also impacted because there are those petrochemical plants that are creating and manufacturing and cracking plastic and pumping out. So obviously if you are having an impact from the chemical plant near your house, you're downstream in the airways, it's going to affect your breathing, your breathability, your soil quality, especially in that top horizon of soil growth, and it's going to affect your ability to grow your own food, which is something that more and more people are doing as prices of vegetables and fruit start to get fairly higher as our political and cultural world changes. And reducing single-use plastics will help continue to protect our drinking water. So our drinking water potable plants will have less impact because there will be less plastics. Assuming that we can start to rein in this issue, municipalities won't have to spend millions of dollars figuring out how to remove all the plastic from our drinking water. And educating our fellow neighbors, students, and leaders creates an ongoing dialogue about how to find solutions that don't involve plastic, because they are out there, and it's just a matter of time before it's adopted more on a worldwide scale. So there's a lot of hope. There's some really incredible people doing some amazing things with plastics, alternatives across every facet of transportation, medical, food, and energy sector, chemical sector. There's so much going on. So reasons for hope, but we have to have that dialogue, which starts right here, which is great. So thank you all for being here. Real quick, just what's going on in Westchester. So if you're unfamiliar, so Westchester is a borough, and these are the recyclable items, and I kind of put that in quotes because recyclable only means it's recycled if there's a buyer at the end of the waste stream. I'll just stop there. So if there's a buyer for a plastic, and 1 through 7 just means the resin type of the plastic, so high density polyethylene, HDPE, I think is like 2 or 3, and polystyrene is number 7. These are different types of compounds. And only when these compounds are buyable, if they're not contaminated, are they recyclable. Otherwise, they just get picked up by your local waste management plant and they get sorted. So you use them once, you clean them up, you put them in the bin, they go to a sorting facility. They don't just go straight to the recycling plant. There has to be a sorting process, which is complicated with belt systems and lights and little dashes of air that separate things, and there's manual movement. And it's a very complicated, tedious process to sort all of our material. Hundreds of thousands of tons across Pennsylvania every single year. And only when someone is willing at the very end of that sorting process to take all of that material does it actually get recycled. and it only gets recycled if there's less contamination. So contamination means, is there grease on your plastic? Is there big chunks of food? Is there feces? Is there a dead animal in there? All these things, right? They end up in our waste stream by accident, or just by apathy, or just people are busy and they can't clean everything. So most of our stuff actually goes to the landfill, unfortunately. I think as a nation or globally, it's like 6 to 10% of things are actually recycled. And here in the United States, it's definitely on the lower end. But it does happen, and when it does happen, it is really cool what they do with the waste material. So if you're thinking about, the bin over there that says recycling, you have to figure out, well, what is the waste management company accepting, and then is there a buyer for it? So every single little thing, piece of plastic is going to have a number. So this one has 1, and it is polyethylene triethylene or something. I forget the name of it, but this is a number 1 plastic. So if when I'm done with this, I toss it in the recycling can, this only gets recycled if the waste management company that picks up this waste accepts number 1, and if there's someone who wants to buy number 1. So when, you can do a little homework, I don't know if there's a class in here, right? You guys can figure out, what is Westchester accept? Who's your waste management company? And what are the numbers of plastics, and where does it go, right? So that's a little homework for you. In July 2019, I was part of the Borough Council Sustainability Advisory Committee, and we put together a ordinance, which is essentially just like a guidance. It's kind of like a sub-law that banned single-use plastic bags and straws within the borough. So think you're going to Wawa, you get a plastic bag, you get a straw. We said, hey, let's try to avoid that. Then we said, COVID happened, and so we said, okay, let's push it back. People aren't ready. There's too much going on. So enforcement of the ordinance actually started in January 2022. There was so much support for this ordinance. It was incredible. We, Margaret and Nathaniel and everyone here on the green team gathered so many signatures and reached out through Nextdoor and other platforms to garner the local borough support. We had schools come together, we had students, we had leaders show up and say, hey, we really support this. Thank you for doing this. They had signs. It was wonderful. The whole room was packed. And the Borough Council said, sure, we approve of this. So that is one of those examples of where community numbers and passion really do make something come together, even if the end result isn't always, hey, we did something and now it's completely enforced and it's perfect, but we have to start somewhere. So the ordinance banned the distribution of commercial establishments of plastic bags and drink straws within the borough, established a small bag fee for if you wanted to use another type of bag, like a paper bag. Paper bags have their own issues. We're not going to get into that tonight, but at least from a plastic standpoint, it was a step in the right direction. And I think I got this wrong. I wrote 72 restaurants. Maybe I was thinking really positively, but I think you said 40 restaurants or something.
40 the first day, and then yeah, you're right. There were additional that the students went in on their own, and outside of the borough, they actually were driving around with the West Town van. So
amazing.
Pretty amazing. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and so that's 72 restaurants that had not received any personal attention to this ordinance and this guidance, but they had someone come in and say, hey, we care about this, and they listened, and they're going to continue to listen. And it's only with that enforcement do we actually or that engagement do things continue. So that's very important, to stay engaged, keep the momentum, keep going. This I pulled from the website. I'm not sure how updated it is, but these are the sustainable storefronts in Westchester. So I'm sure you've heard of these. I think Dia Dolce or Dia Doce is like right by the campus, and they make amazing cupcakes. And then all these other restaurants and storefronts, they participate by doing 3 of the 5. So they either use recyclable paper bags for takeout, or they have no styrofoam or one of those. But they've all committed to using recyclable paper bags and encouraging customers to bring their own bags. So that's a fair amount of places that people visit on a daily basis, and that adds up. So that is a really amazing community effort they've committed to. So we're really happy about that. I think we're going to address this in some of the questions, but how do we take action without fear? So I've just landed a whole bunch of info on there, and but I think that if there's momentum, if there's education, if you feel like you can do something, you absolutely can. There's so much to do. Just pick one little thing and start there. And so I've pulled up a few ideas here. Filter your tap water is one thing. I use a HydroViv filter at home and in my shower, and that reduces all of the different chemicals and plastics out of my water. You just change it out twice a year. I think it's like $60 each filter. You can reuse your steel or glass containers at home. Try to avoid the plastic bottles. Plastic bottle water actually does leach plastic chemicals into your water, and there are microplastics in plastic water bottles. So try not to use those. Bring your own things. I like to keep my own containers in the car when I remember. I'm not perfect, no one is, but we don't need one person to be 100% perfect. We need 100 people to be 10% perfect. That's where the impact comes along. Choose your natural fabrics when you can, cotton, wool, hemp, and athleisure is very big, right? So yoga pants, yoga type shirts, all that kind of stuff. All of those are made with mostly plastic materials, if you're unfamiliar. And those when you put them in the washing machine, they kind of get like ripped by the washing machine really easily. So if you have workout gear, try to just hand wash it or spot wash. It really doesn't need to go in the washing machine 25 times, and it breaks down faster over time. So that's an easy way. And there's been studies about how hand washing your garments can significantly reduce your microplastic output. Also buying secondhand. You can avoid animal-based products, so fish. Fish are ingesting microplastics every single day in the ocean. Avoid fish. You're not going to get that microplastic in their meat. Also, things like processed chicken nuggets are coming up positive for high levels of microplastics. You can also support your local plastic reduction ordinances and businesses. So check out those businesses and go see what they're up to, right? Like, are they doing what they said they were doing? And if not, have a conversation with them. Engaging in conversation is absolutely where things are changing and how we make a difference. People like what their friends and family are doing more than anything else. People don't really listen to stuff on TV, but if your friends, well, they do somewhat, but if your friends and your family are doing it or you're doing it, you have a greater impact in your local circle. So if you start that initiative and work outwards, more people will listen to you around you. You can just join a community cleanup, so keeping plastics out of our rivers is really easy. Leading with shared values, so starting with a simple message, what do we all want? We all want clean air, safe water, healthy bodies. I don't think we can say nobody wants that. And we're finding ways to solve that. Then you want to pair your concern with context. So, hey, it's everywhere. We're learning more about what that means for us. Let's see what we can do moving forward. You can offer agency and solutions. So always end with a concrete action that encourages people. Some, simple things to do. Some of the things I already mentioned. And then use a precaution and progress message, which is we don't have to wait for perfect science, but we have to act on what we already know.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was amazingly thorough and incredibly informative. We are going to introduce the rest of the panel members at this point in time. After they give us our intros, we got a couple questions, and we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A, and we'll be trying to get you out of here around 8 o'clock. So don't worry, we're not going to keep you here for 2 hours. All right, so thank you again, Rachel. Next, we're going to introduce Dee Durham, who's co-founder and chair of Plastic Free Delaware.
Thank you. Again, my name is Dee Durham. I'm the co-chair and founder of Plastic Free Delaware. So we are the statewide group that was founded similar to what's going on here in Westchester, but for the state of Delaware. Delaware is sort of just like a big county. So we can get things done at the state level. We don't have a lot of the municipal level, so we just decided to go big. But it's a really poignant week for me in particular, because we actually got started back in 2008 when my kids were little, and we had them as part of a Roots and Shoots group, which is out of the Jane Goodall Institute. So Jane Goodall is really near and dear to my heart, and her passing this week is very sad, but hopefully lives on in many people, like all of us, all around the world, in trying to make a better world. So we got started because we were looking for a quick little project to do, and I had been reading how all around the world, like in Europe and Africa, China, all kinds of places had already banned the bag. So I was like, oh, well, we can get that done in Delaware. That should be easy, right? Well, it took us 10 years, basically, till we got the legislation done in Delaware to ban plastic bags. But we were still the 4th state in the country to do it, even though it took us 10 years. So that tells you kind of how when we got started, the plastic pollution movement, so to speak, was in its infancy, and people thought I was crazy. I literally went to environmental organizations to talk about what we were trying to do, and they, looked at me kind of askew as I was, like really far out there trying to work on plastic. Like, what's this? But now I'm pleased to say, like, there are people all over the globe. The movement is so strong. There are people all kinds of organizations working on plastic pollution, marine pollution. The list goes on and on. It's a very, very powerful movement now, and continuing to grow. So anyway, we started out just focused on single-use plastic bags. Delaware being one of the reasons why it took us 10 years was because Delaware's home of tax-free shopping. We don't have a sales tax, and we could not get legislation considered by the legislature that had a fee on plastic, like most jurisdictions do, all around the world. So you put a fee on plastic, you ban paper. We couldn't do that because I kept trying, and that kept getting rejected until it was like hit over the head. You can't use a fee-based bill. So finally we just did a bill that banned plastic bags, and we didn't do anything with paper. So yes, we are trying to get people to switch to reusable, but most stores actually have switched away from both paper and single-use plastic. But anyway, so that was our focus. We got that done in 2019. My kids are no longer involved, but I was committed to this whole thing as we were growing along the way. And our kids are long out of college now, but in the meantime, we grew as an organization. We then we kind of do a two-pronged approach. We do educational things like this. We have school programs. We do film screenings. We do all kinds of outreach to educate in Delaware on the issues. And then we work on legislation and policy. So the next piece of legislation we got done was balloon releases. I think there were 7 other states at the time. I don't know what the number is now. But I think we were the 7th state in the country to ban balloon releases. And then we got a styrofoam bill done for restaurants. So those are the 3 largest pieces of legislation we got done at the Delaware state level. We now have 2 bills pending this year, heading into January. They've both progressed partway through the legislature. And the first one is Skip the Stuff, which, if you're not familiar with that, New York City, you may have heard, DC, lots of municipalities, New Jersey, have Skip the Stuff bills, where basically if you go get takeout and then they give you all that stuff that goes with it that you don't really need because you're going home, you already have ketchup in the fridge, you already have soy sauce, you already have silverware, you already have napkins at home. You don't need all that stuff. So stop putting it in my bag unless I ask for it. So that's a Skip the Stuff policy. We're trying to get that done at the state level. And then the other bill we have pending right now is retail sales of styrofoam. So that's passed the Senate and it's waiting for its House vote right now. We've got Farron and I were talking earlier, we've got a bunch of other stuff in the works, but I guess we can only do so much at a time. But we've always been steeped in youth, because when we were working on the plastic bag legislation, we had kids from age 5 all the way through high school as advocates for the bill. And so one of the biggest projects we have right now is our youth summit, annual youth summit for high school students. And last year we had 700 students come from all across the state and about 100 educators. So we're hoping to be even bigger this coming year. But that's one of our biggest initiatives, and has been really exciting to see. The youth of today are not the leaders of tomorrow. They're actually leading the way today. So we decided we needed to help them be the leaders that they want to be and educate them on these issues and that sort of thing. So anyway, I'll pass pass the mic on, but my card's up here. If anyone wants to follow up with me later, I'm happy to have you email me or call me. Just reach out, and thanks for having me here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dee. Thrilled to have you here. Next up, we have Elliot Arnold, professor here at Westchester University in Earth and Space Sciences.
So, as a professor in the Earth and Space Sciences department, myself and students who work in my lab are actually attempting to characterize microplastics throughout Chester County, and we found some pretty remarkable things. First, I guess at the most fundamental level, we've discovered that microplastics are everywhere and they're unavoidable. We find them in every surface in our lab. We find them in every vessel we use to collect water from the streams throughout Chester County. They're so pervasive that we actually have to account for them in our corrections, meaning that we have to subtract the baseline number of microplastics from every stream sample we take because we find them everywhere. What's also remarkable is what we find. In a single 5-liter water sample, we can find over 100 microplastic particles. And when we take those microplastic particles into the lab and analyze them with what's called an infrared spectroscopy device, we find that almost every single one of those particles are polyester. And what that means is all the plastics that we find, 95% of the plastics that we find in streams throughout Chester County are coming from our clothing. And these data are borne out in other studies as well. Study after study from across the world has demonstrated that microplastics are primarily composed of fibers from polyester fabrics, from textiles. So that creates a really uncomfortable truth, I think, for everybody. If we really want to cut back on microplastic pollution in our waterways, we have to buy fewer things. We have to reuse. We have to be okay with old clothing and make sure we check the tags of our clothing to see if it is cotton or polyester. I bet if you check your tags of your clothing right now, you're probably all wearing some plastic, probably from a sweatshop in some impoverished part of the world, which is really sad. And fast fashion has only accelerated that trend, meaning that we're going through pounds, kilograms in the scientific community, of clothing every single year that we just throw out because we hate the way we look in it after 1 or 2 uses. And as another colleague brought up, every time we wash the polyester clothes, we might feel like we're doing a good job in decreasing the amount of microplastics that are entering aquatic systems. The drying cycle can essentially shred that article of clothing into upwards of 500,000 microplastic particles. And Chloe Maddie's done a lot of the research that I'm talking about. She's in the audience now. We hypothesize that the microplastics that we're finding in the streams throughout Chester County is primarily derived from that exact process, from washing and drying clothing. And it's sort of depressing to see that, and I don't really know how we could stop it, but it is certainly affecting aquatic ecosystems from the microscopic level to the macroscopic level, meaning things at the base of the food chain are ingesting these microplastics, and trophic scale interactions are transferring them up to us, or things that eat us. That doesn't make much sense. Tigers, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Essentially what I'm saying is things from the bottom of the trophic scale to the top. And we see it in every single stream and every single watershed in Chester County. Another group of students are actually quantifying the flux of these microplastics from these watersheds into the Chesapeake Bay and Delaware Bay, and they find that on every day they export 10 to the 9th, that's 10 with 9 zeros, 10 to the 9th microplastic particles into the Chesapeake, and 10 to the 10th into the Delaware Bay. So 10 with 10 zeros after it. That's a lot. I think that's pretty alarming when we figured that out. And yeah, I guess it's encouraged me to just buy used clothing. I literally am doing that all the time. This is a nice shirt that I'm wearing right now. It's a pretty nice shirt. I got this from an estate sale. I go to estate sales in really nice neighborhoods. That's a tip. I think we're supposed to offer people tips. Look where the estate sale is. If it's a big house, go there and buy a lot of the clothing there. And I try and make sure that it's cotton. I don't always succeed with that, but it really has encouraged me to buy less plastic clothing. Because like I said, everything that we find is fibrous, small little hairs of microplastics that are derived from polyester, which is a microplastic compound. And I'd be willing to discuss my results further. And if anybody has any more specific questions about our research, I can answer that. And hopefully within the next few months, we'll be publishing our results in scientific journals. Thank you.
That's amazing. I'm very inspired. My brain's ticking. What other initiatives can we do with the Green Team, in terms of helping educate the community? Could we help host events at thrift stores and, kind of encourage people to have a day where all natural items are 20% off?
Yep.
Maybe there's a week when we can facilitate that. So thanks for getting our brains going in that direction as well.
Rachel, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
The Green Team is sponsoring a clothing recycling event the day after Thanksgiving on High Street, so we'll be publicizing that.
Perfect. Yes, and we'll have much more information. If you want to come give your information to me, we'll make sure you include it on any Westchester Green Team emailers, and there's a social media page as well. So thank you, Margaret. And yes, one more time, it's a recycling event the day after Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, and then our final panelist for tonight is Farron Savitz, who is Zero Waste Advocate with Penn Environment.
I'll try to keep this pretty quick so we can get to the questions, but thank you all for coming out tonight, and thanks to the Green Team for putting this on. I'm Farron. I'm the Zero Waste Advocate with Penn Environment. If you're unfamiliar with us, we are a statewide environmental nonprofit. So we work on a range of issues from climate change and clean energy to air pollution, water pollution. As a zero waste advocate, I run our work related to trash and plastic and recycling, and a lot of it focuses on what we're talking about today, single-use plastics. We do a lot of work tackling plastic pollution at the local level. I've helped pass over 36 local bans on single-use plastics like plastic bags, styrofoam containers, like the one in Westchester Borough, including in our biggest cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That local action is really one of the best places we can start tackling this issue. It's where we can build momentum. It's where we can take a dent in the plastic pollution problem. It's where we can actually eliminate a lot of plastic. Westchester and all the other communities around Pennsylvania that have already passed laws tackling plastic pollution combine to eliminate over 5,000 tons of plastic waste every single year. And as we've heard from the other panelists, that's waste that's not going to get recycled. It's going to go to our landfills, it's going to go to our incinerators, it's going to end up as litter directly in our environment, it's going to end up as microplastics, polluting our lives, harming our wildlife, harming our health. So that local action really stacks up. It makes a big difference, it makes a big impact. Our work at Penn Environment also expands beyond the local. We do a lot of work at the state and federal level, doing advocacy and policy work, working to pass bills like our neighboring states, Delaware and New Jersey have already done, like statewide plastic bag bans or tackling styrofoam containers. But we also know there's no sort of silver bullet solution towards tackling plastic pollution. So we have to work at this problem from a bunch of different angles. It's not just the single-use plastics. It is working on fast fashion, using clothing more often, not throwing it out, making sure our electronic devices, things like phones, computers, which often have a lot of plastic components, don't end up wasted after just a couple years, that we can keep them working for longer and longer and longer, so we don't have more electronic waste, which adds to the plastic problem. It's about working on pre-production plastic, those tiny little plastic pieces that make the products we use in our daily lives. We're working on federal legislation like the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act and the Plastic Pellet Free Waters Act. Penn Environment, we also tackle the problem by holding polluters accountable, doing things like lawsuits and other legal challenges where there are facilities polluting our waterways with styrofoam, with plastic pellets, with types of plastic pollution, so that they really stop, and so that we can make sure we have clean streams, clean rivers, clean air, clean environment. And then we also do the education and outreach side of things. We've done a lot of work on microplastic pollution. I've tested over 100 different rivers, lakes, and streams all across Pennsylvania, including 50 of our cleanest, most pristine waterways for microplastics. And based on what we just heard, I don't think this should surprise anyone. There were microplastics in every single waterway that I've tested. So we're showing that this plastic pollution isn't just a problem for our oceans. It's not something remote or far off. It's in the places where our drinking water comes from. It's where we go fishing on the weekends, where we might boat, where kids play. It's the streams we splashed around in growing up. It's where we go to get away on a weekend. It's the lifeblood of our communities, and pretty much every single one is polluted with plastic. So if I'm giving a tip to everyone, I am seconding a lot of the tips from the panel that have been said already, but I think an extra crucial step that everyone can do is reach out to your elected officials. Whether it's at the local level, the county level, the state level, the federal level. Our elected officials work for us. They listen to their constituents. If you let them know that you care about plastic pollution, that you care about tackling different areas of our waste crisis, that you want to fix recycling, they listen. It makes them care about these issues. They want to work on them too. And so they're more likely to introduce a new bill. I don't know how many times I talked to a legislator, a state representative, a state senator, a local council person, and they say the reason they're working on these issues is because someone in their constituency sent them an email, gave them a phone call, reached out and said, hey, I care about this, let's do something about it. Because that's where it starts. It's how Westchester did the plastic bag ban, citizens getting together, making their voices heard, and working on it. So that's a tip I leave for everyone. Make your voice heard. Let people know you care about this.
Thanks so much, Farron. I'm going to abandon the mic now, come down, and we're going to kind of have a fireside chat. We'll try to project our voices. Just raise your hand if you can't hear it clearly, or we will have time for Q&A at the end as well. So we'll do a couple of questions, and then let's absolutely get to yours. Okay, so we covered a lot of this already, but maybe our questions can be kind of the cementing things that you'd like to leave with the audience. So why is it urgent to act on plastics now, and what does a plastic-free future mean to you? Anybody can answer.
I'll dive in first on why it's urgent. We're using more and more plastic every single day, every single year, and that plastic is piling up. It never truly goes away. It's just turning into microplastics. So we have to cut off that flow of plastic into our environment, into our lives. The longer we take to act, the more plastic there's going to be out there that's impacting our wildlife, our streams, our ecosystems, and our health. So certainly urgency is more necessary every single year because we keep creating more of this stuff every single year.
If you want, I'll add to that. And one reason why that's happening is, I don't think it was mentioned, but it was mentioned that plastic's made out of natural gas and oil, right? And as the world electrifies, we're electrifying our cars, we're electrifying our homes, our stoves, our, all kinds of things. The plastics industry and the gas and oil industry, which are one and the same really, saw that decline happening, and they're like, where can we get a new market? Well, the new market is plastics. The future is plastics for them. So the production of plastic is actually ramping up right now, and has been. So we need to certainly raise awareness and try to turn that around. And plastics are not going to leave our lives. We're still going to have plastics for many things, but we're focused on single-use plastics that get used for a short period of time and then end up in the landfill or out in the environment.
What policies at the county or borough level have proven most effective at reducing single-use plastics, and what gaps still exist? I know one that comes to mind for me, I'm not sure if I've researched the outcomes, but Ithaca, New York has a neat program where restaurants have stickers in the windows that says bring your own containers. So there's some really neat kind of twists. Obviously those aren't maybe policies, but curious, Dee, you shared some with us earlier, but any you've heard in the news or any that you know of as being extremely effective?
Well, I'll just point out, I think you mentioned just the cost of government cleanup of all the plastic that ends up there. And I will say after our plastic bag bill had gone into effect for a year or so, I happened to be talking to the public works director of Wilmington, the largest city in Delaware, and she said, oh my God, that bill is the best bill ever. It has made such a huge impact. We are finding so much less plastic bags out on the streets, in the trees, in the storm drains, in our water system. So it was really, pretty gratifying to hear that coming from her, that she had really noticed a difference in our plastic bag bill.
And in New Jersey, they banned the plastic bag. They have a statewide ordinance. And I think within the first year, they eliminated 1 billion bags from landfills and production. I'm not sure which end of the linear waste stream it was at, but that's 1 billion bags that were not produced or then had to be found their way to a waste or recycling facility. So that made an incredible impact, just thinking of 1 billion bags in its first year.
Dee, I'm going to continue with you here. From your work as a council person, how do you balance regulation with the concerns of local businesses around cost and convenience?
I neglected to mention that in the meantime, in 2018, I ran for county council, so I'm actually on county council of Newcastle County, Delaware, where I can't do a lot of work regarding plastic pollution. It's just not in our purview as a county. So I'm still doing a lot of statewide policy work on plastics while I'm doing other stuff at the county. But we have done a little bit at the county in terms of our county cafes and our vendors. I got put in the vendor contract that like our food trucks for events and stuff like that can't use single-use plastic. But it's an interesting question because it's not something I really think about really in terms of, I just have the goal of trying to get this done because I know it's right. And for businesses, like for Skip the Stuff policy that I mentioned earlier, one of the great things about that, I'm not so sure about bags, but probably there's an element of it. But for Skip the Stuff, there's actual data out there about how much restaurants can save. So the restaurant industry is still not happy with us, but because they feel like we're targeting them with all these bills, but they can save thousands of dollars a year if they skip the stuff and stop just handing out all that stuff in all your takeout bags. You think about, if they have X number of customers a day and they're just putting all that stuff in every bag, it's from like $4,000 to $22,000 a year, depending on how big the restaurant is. So that, whenever we have something like that we can try to educate them on, it certainly helps.
Yeah, maybe a little twist on that theme, Elliot, from a university standpoint, how do you think campuses like Westchester can lead in modeling plastic-free practices?
I don't know, I'm actually just a little worried about it because, of course, I mean, all the stuff that we're talking about now, the deleterious effects on human health and aquatic ecosystems, terrestrial ecosystems for that matter, involve the microplastic particles that we can't see. Let me rephrase that. Involve the plastic particles that we can't see, which we call microplastics. I mean, literally all we're finding is polyesters. Study after study after study after study, Chloe's read hundreds of them, all are finding these fibers that are polyesters. I'm not saying it's important to ban the plastics I'm not saying it's not important to ban the plastics that we can see. But what I'm saying is all the stuff that we're talking about now in terms of health impacts are really about the plastics we can't see. And they're not coming up as polypropylene. They're not coming up as polyethylene, the things that these bags are made out of. It's important to ban them. You understand? Does that come off as a jerk? What I'm trying to say is, you can see the difference with that, but the problem is still there. Perhaps we have to convince people that it's the stuff that you can't see that we should really be concerned about, because that's the stuff that's crossing the blood-brain barrier. That's stuff that's finding its way into these macroinvertebrates and streams. That's the stuff that we're drinking, even if we use a filter, because it's literally carried by wind to every surface in every room that we've studied, into every creek and stream in Pennsylvania. What did you say about those pop-up shops? Like that might.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
look.
Right.
We have to fundamentally change our culture. We're being told that we constantly look horrible. I'm being told that at least. Are you guys being told that too?
Because you shop at
No,
St.
because I'm not wearing the latest thing. You see these pants I'm wearing when I stand up? They're baggier now. But 3 years ago, I would have been made fun of if I was wearing pants this baggy. You're supposed to wear baggy pants now, if you didn't catch the memo. So I had to buy new things because I felt weird about that. But the point is that maybe we should just be like, well, forget that and be happy with what we have and buy less. But that's a really hard thing to convince people to do because our economy is built around just buying things and throwing them out after a few years. And clothing is one of those things. Of course, plastic bags. No, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing. So how do you convince people to like be happy with themselves and not buy clothing, buy old stuff?
I think there is a growing movement in thrifting and a reuse of clothes, a growing awareness that really only just started a few years ago, based on the facts you laid out.
Yeah.
We've had high school students that have started websites for clothing reuse and that sort of thing. One was a keynote speaker at our youth summit last year. So it's coming. I think it's taking a while, but also maybe the visible plastic bags and other types of plastic that you can see are the on-ramp to educate people.
No, microplastics. And they do shred. They are a part of the problem. Yeah. It's just, to finish this, I guess then, what I'm trying to say is that, that maybe we can encourage people to consume less and perhaps be okay with that level of reduced consumption. I don't know how we can square that with our the world we live in. I don't know how. I don't want to be poor, and unfashionable. Those two things are like the worst two things that you can be, in my opinion. No, that's a joke. That's a horrible joke.
Fashion is determined and derived by the self, how you feel in your clothes. But to your point, I mean, there's something to be said that universities are a prime place where a change in philosophy can happen. Yeah. Talking about things like this at a different level and encouraging discussion and curiosity. And so while it is incredibly overwhelming to figure out where we're going to start, I think knowing that each of us has a different access point and a university is its own unique one. Yeah. And I promise, your turn. Let's go.
Okay, I'm only raising my hand not to like pressure you, but because so our class also went to Dr. Arnold's Barnaby's lecture.
Oh yeah, I remember you guys.
Which is, oh, you remember me? Okay.
That got wild. That got wild. No, not in a bad way. I drank while I was giving that talk, and it was.
Can you repeat the question?
She saw me at a bar talking about.
She's going. Yeah, they're about to answer the question.
Westchester University event. But the fear of God was instilled in me by you around the date 2100, where we're just like so fucked after that.
Oh, the collapse of thermal circulation, you mean?
Yeah. How can we? I say this as a fellow activist. What the last campaign that I led to like $1.65 million coming from Westchester directly to its students. So I promise you, I'm not trying to be like, well, you haven't done anything, but
I haven't really.
I have such big concerns about the scalability of what's currently being done, and also the marketing team of scientists. Because one thing that I'm sorry, you said something about like family and friends are influential, but like my in-laws all watch Fox News, and nothing I tell them will like go through their dumb little heads. I hope no one here is a Fox News person, but if you are, I don't know why you're here. So, just how can we, I have two questions. One, how can scientists who have the facts and knowledge team up with marketers who know how to reach the public? Because like we're only 75 years away from 2100, which may or may not have been an arbitrary date. I can't remember. I'm sorry.
It's changing it doesn't mean the world's going to end. It just means that the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which redistributes heat from the equator to the poles, is on the verge of collapsing now, and that's when the models predict it's going to shut down. It's sort of unrelated, but yeah.
I'm kind of panicked about that.
I mean, it's going to be bad for Scandinavia and like England and Ireland and their ability to grow things. But I think you bring up a good point that we're part of a global community, and like we've demonstrated that microplastics can travel hundreds of kilometers. You stop producing plastics here, we're still going to have plastics in our watershed. So I think maybe the idea that you're hinting at is that we need a lot of people to change fast.
Well, I also, if I could just ask the second part of my question, I'm sorry, it's kind of related.
It's fine.
I've read a lot of articles, I don't know if they're good or not, about like most pollution being done by big corporations and not by individuals. And I'm wondering, why aren't we going after the big corporations instead of the individuals? Like, I can not use straws or not use plastic bags or like whatever, but like that's not gonna.
Don't do a thing. It's a drop in the bucket.
It's not enough, and that's I think the key to motivating people is somewhat preying on how desperate the situation is, especially their economic situation. And I'm wondering, like, what in your circles is being done to attack the big corporations that are really like will actually change stuff.
Yeah, and I'll jump in because I think all of us have different perspectives on that. And just to repeat the question for everyone in the room in case you couldn't hear, it's sort of about where do we start? Since a lot of the pollution comes from massive corporations, it feels like local action can be a drop in the bucket. Where's the hope? How do we get started on this? And to me, at least, the hope is finding those first steps we can take, because, and this relates to the previous question, I think about our society as being sort of a throwaway society. We are so geared towards disposing of everything in our lives. And if we can start making changes in our lives, and I think one of the best ways to do that is through legislation, to get whole communities adopting these changes, like using reusable bags, like using a reusable bottle, thinking about reuse. It expands to other parts of our lives. We can start doing stuff like making sure our clothing lasts for longer, so we're not using synthetic cheap fabrics that then degrade into microplastic fibers that get into our drinking water. It extends to stuff like our electronics, where if we can keep our phones working for 1 year longer, that's not going to be toxic heavy metals that end up in the waste stream. Because if we think about stuff as being reusable and not disposable, we can make those changes throughout our lives. And the point about corporations is a good one, and a lot of it is through policy. One policy we didn't talk about earlier is a thing called producer responsibility, because it is really hard as an individual to eliminate plastic in your life, to stop using plastic because it's in so many different places. So if we put the burden of dealing with the waste or of creating systems to get rid of the plastic waste back on the corporations that produce the plastic or produce the plastic products, it makes a huge impact. And so there are laws called producer responsibility laws. They take a bunch of different forms. They've been used for decades for things like lead paint, batteries, materials that when they're wasted or disposed of are hazardous. Plastic, when it's wasted and disposed of, is hazardous for our health and our environment. So having these laws that put the onus on our corporations is a big way of dealing with the problem and shifting that responsibility from individuals like us to people who create the waste. And then there are other avenues too. The city of Philadelphia just sued several corporations over their claims of being able to recycle their plastic film bags. And that's because, as we heard earlier, all plastic is labeled with those little chasing arrows in the triangle and the number. And we all think that means you can recycle that plastic. But only some of those plastics can be recycled. All of them might get accepted, but only a small percent are actually getting recycled. So having cities like Philadelphia, which are suing certain corporations because of this misleading labeling, having states like California that have passed things called truth in recycling laws, those are other ways to make sure corporations aren't misleading the public and can actually start getting the plastic that can be recycled to the recycling, and making sure stuff like plastic bags, styrofoam, and all these other products don't end up in the recycling where they're just going to gum up the works and cause all sorts of other problems. So that was a bunch of different little pieces. But again, plastic isn't, it's almost Halloween. So plastic's not like a werewolf. There's no silver bullet that's going to kill it. We have to do a whole bunch of different things to tackle the problem. And so there are all these different solutions, and it's just starting somewhere. And a lot of times that somewhere is local action.
I think the hard thing to remember too is some of those corporations are looking to us as consumers for how to behave. And so if small amounts of us are able to change, that's a signal that there are green buyers for that corporation. So just like Farron said, attacking it from the community perspective, the government perspective, the business perspective. I mean, it is daunting to try to figure out how you can get around this, but if we don't attack it from all sides, there probably is no chance.
Hi, I'm Karen with the Green Team. Thank you so much. This is really wonderful and answering a lot of my personal questions with all of your personal responsibility, personal experience. I have a theory that if we all knew what our local recycling plants and local trash disposal people were dealing with, that we would change our ways in buying and things like that. But my question is, does anybody have any experience in researching that and presenting it to the public? Like we were talking about marketing, like putting it out there. So it's like, by the way, here's how big our landfill is, and here's how much we think is being recycled or not being recycled.
Yeah, so both in my career as an environmental geologist and then also in my volunteering kind of on my own education, I was privy to going to landfills across the state, across other states, as well as the local sorting and recycling facilities, and saw very much firsthand what that full process is. And it is very much a super fast-paced, volume-based industry in which they have to process hundreds of thousands of tons of waste per year. So we're talking about the maintenance of equipment, manual labor, high turnover rates, low pay, injuries, repetitive motion. There's so much that goes into taking what we waste and then doing something with it. And being there in that space and seeing firsthand what it's like, it is incredibly eye-opening. And I know that when I was working as a consultant, but also in my own time, these places offer tours. And you can take a tour through these sorting facilities. You can see how they crush and cube and filter the material. And you can go out there. I don't think that they tour landfills because they're a little bit more complex, but I've been to the landfills, and they're also an incredible volume. The amount of material that they deal with on a daily basis is astronomical. And so if you do want to see firsthand what it's like, you can contact Republic or Waste Management and you can get a tour. They have tours for going and seeing what it's like. And I've personally taken some of that education and I put it into my webinars for different townships and talked about it. But I think it's very much, you have to almost see it for yourself. You can go to a site and you can go to, see how they're crushing the recycling pieces or they're moving the waste with the big trucks. But until, you can see it on TV or a YouTube channel, until you actually get there, you don't even understand what they're dealing with on a daily basis. And I think because waste management is subsidized by taxes, it's so affected by the socioeconomic policies of a county or municipality. So if there's more money to deal with the waste properly, then you have more access to better equipment, cleaner equipment, more maintenance on the equipment, better pay for the people who stay longer, who know what they're doing, with better training. So that comes from improving who you vote for at a local basis, who then can improve budgets for that waste management. So now we're back to the politics aspect of your local leaders do impact things such as waste management facilities. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I would love if someone wants to get a tour of a recycling facility. I know a bunch of different contacts, and I just actually recently went to one for construction waste in the city. And I saw firsthand the amount of wood and concrete and all the things that they separate, and they have to deal with asbestos and nails and sometimes live animals, and there's so many things that we really don't even understand. And I think I live in Philadelphia right now, and recently we had a setback in that the waste management folks within the Philadelphia County wanted a raise, and they wanted better health standards and things like that, and they stopped picking up the trash. And for the first time, many Philadelphia citizens saw what actually happens when we don't handle our waste.
and there were makeshift landfills popping up, and there were rats everywhere in some of these communities that just decided to take the waste and deal with it later, and they were getting paid by the pound. It was a whole mess, literally and figuratively. And only when they demanded higher pay did they then come back and start to remove the waste. So we have to, I think, come back to who's dealing with the waste on a daily basis, like one of you just said, and what are we paying them? What is their equipment like? How much access do they have to good health care? Are they getting hurt by the equipment? Is there metal pieces? Are the belt systems cleaned and everything? And then support budgets for those waste management facilities to make sure that those people are getting what they need. That's where we can start.
Yeah, I know we've been discussing a little, could there be art installations in the town that help demonstrate some of that visually, or social media campaigns? I know we're over 8 o'clock. I just want to let everyone know we won't hold you here if you need to slip out. At this point, let's open up more questions to the group, and then I've got one final question for everybody, and we'll wrap up. In the back, please.
Yeah, I was wondering, there is precedent, and you mentioned the student there, the marketing, which is the ban of CFCs, aerosol sprays, back in the 80s and 90s. So there is precedent in which there was national action, and we had a national ban of CFCs. And I remember back then, I don't remember if it was commercials or a lot of articles talking about CFCs and how it was destroying the ozone layer. And people acted on it, and I remember people stopped buying deodorants, and big companies changed their CFCs. So there is precedent. I wonder if any of you have looked into that, and hopefully gives a little hope to all of us that maybe there will be a ban.
Do you feel that the world's changed a lot since then? With like the receptivity of these, it just seems so divided.
But
that's a great point.
Farron mentioned a couple federal bills that many of us have been working on, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which had a bunch of had a bunch of different components. Just as you might imagine, nothing's moving in Washington and hasn't been for several years. So anything like that at the national level just is stalled. And even we were chatting about the UN. There's a UN plastics treaty that keeps getting killed by the United States and China, I think. I can't remember. There's a couple of large countries that don't let it move anywhere in the UN. So they keep trying to get a global treaty passed, and hopefully it will pass at some point, but it's I think, it's not on the horizon right now.
I'm curious if I want to do some research to see from a marketing perspective, where they're able to kind of say, this problem is this monster, and it was all over marketing, and it actually became a change in people's minds before policy. I think those are a lot of things it seems like we're kicking around back and forth. Where's our personal responsibility? Where's the responsibility of businesses? And where and how can our government better serve us? And I know we've covered some heavy topics, so we're gonna kind of leave with one lighter ones. Our panelists have been kind enough to leave cards up front and offered to come answer any additional questions, so please feel free to come up afterwards. The question is just if each of us in this room tonight made one commitment. I know this is tricky for all of you. One commitment, you can only choose one. What small but powerful step would you personally recommend? Would you like to go first?
Sure. I said it before, and I'll just reiterate it because I think it's the best thing you can do. Call your elected officials. Just pick up the phone, call their office. Whether you leave a voicemail, whether you talk to a staff person, whether you talk to the official themselves, letting them know what issues you care about, from plastic to fashion waste to climate change to all these issues. Just call them, tell them about it, and they're far more likely to do something about it.
I guess, yeah. Educate yourself before you vote for people.
Excellent. And no fast fashion.
Wow, that's two things.
Go ahead, Dee.
I guess I agree with what Farron said, and I guess sort of touching on what was touched on earlier, I think we've all trained ourselves to use reusable water bottles, for instance. So 10, 15 years ago, did you see people walking around with reusable water bottles? Probably not. Now, we got that down. So what's the next step? What what next thing can you incorporate in your daily life? And the young lady that asked the question is gone, but she's right. I mean, we need the corporations to take more responsibility, but since we don't control them necessarily, unless you do what Farron says and get involved and start making phone calls, you can really only control yourself. So what, how can you make a difference in your daily life and your family and talking to other people and just, slowly incorporating changes in your life, shopping at estate sales, things like that.
Agreed. Where you spend your dollar is your greatest voting power every single day. If you have the opportunity to make a decision to buy one thing versus another, think about that. And we vote every day. We don't just vote at the ballot box. We vote when we buy our electronics. We vote when we buy our clothing. Every vote counts, and Target recently suffered some pretty high levels of loss financially from the social impact of their reduction in DEI or elimination of DEI policies. It was a ripple effect out into their consumer world, and influencers and social media jumped on, and they lost a lot of money, and their CEO was recently removed from his position. So there is power in numbers, and I think we have to remember that. I wanted to include another image up there, but forgot to include it. It's a picture of a big fish and a lot of little fish, and it says, "Don't panic," and then the next slide is all the little fish making up this bigger fish chasing out the real big fish, and it says organize. So you can do a lot when you organize. Even just you and one other person can do so much, and if you can, like you said, every little decision, the littlest, smallest things, they add up. If everyone in here just did something a little different tomorrow, that's less waste. Buy less, buy only what you need, buy secondhand, hand wash, don't buy polyester, tell your friends about something new that you learned, and have faith in that your decisions can make a difference. Even if you cannot see it immediately, know that it is making a difference, because that is how it, full change will be impacted across our community and our society.
Thank you, everyone. Please join me in thanking our panelists.